Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse. He's back after a week sabbatical. Mr. Martin Popoff, back from vacation. How are you, my friends? Good to see you.
Pretty good, pretty good. Just dealing with this heat wave. I hope I can remember how to do these shows. We'll see. This will be a good test.
It's only been a week, but the heat does things to the brain, right? I mean, I walk outside in this 95-degree high humidity heat in New York, and I'm like, you walk outside and it just hits you like, oh, must go back into air conditioning. My brain just is fried instantly. It's crazy. My dogs do the same thing. They go outside, they're like, oh, why is it so much worse out here than it is where I just came from? They go out and they do their business. They're back at the door. Let me in. Let me in. I don't like this. It's like,
yeah, nice.
Yeah. So we've got another fun show for you planned. We are after our last episode, we deviated a little bit from what we've been doing of late. We're going to go back to this whole ranking albums from a time period from bands that are sort of linked together. So Martin and I have talked for a bit about doing something with these popular glam metal, hair metal, whatever you want to call these bands from the 80s, because we've kind of talked about them here and there and everywhere. And I came up with the idea, well, how about the LA specific bands? So what we're looking at today is we're going to take the albums of Dokken and Motley Crue and Rat and Quiet Riot and Great White, because those are the core four bands from the LA scene who kind of got kickstarted this whole movement here. We're going to put all their 80s albums into a big pile, and we're going to rank them as we like them. And what do we got? 21, I think, Martin. So
that's what I've got. Yeah.
What do we want to do? Seven groups of seven, or is that a lot? That might be
okay. Yeah, let's do groups of seven.
Okay,
sure.
We can do that.
Sure.
All right. So we'll start off at 21. We'll go all the way to number one.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense for this weather too, because the sun's beating down on the Sunset Strip here as these guys walk around, preen around like peacocks, right? Trying to get their record deals.
And this is like summertime music. I mean, at least
absolutely.
It was back then for sure. Yeah. I think it still kind of is. But
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so all right, so 7. So I'll start with Quiet Riot QR3 with that ridiculous title, right? So what we've got here is July 1986. John Purdell is producing this album, importantly, because he's on keyboards programming. So this is Quiet Riot. Basically, Kevin Dubrow still in the band. Chuck Wright's in there replacing Rudy Sarzo, but it's essentially it almost sounds like Quarter Flash instead of Quiet Riot. It's really weird. It's those uptown kind of guitar licks and then keyboards all over the place and really snappy drums. It's a weird sound. It's kind of entertaining to listen to. It's almost like I wanted to put it higher on the list because it's almost like this weird anthropological case study, why they did this sort of thing. But yeah, it's a big shift from the first two albums, two not counting the Randy.
But we need to talk about that, right? So what about the Randy Rhoads albums? I mean, it's just like it's almost like they didn't exist. So we're gonna call it the third album,
and they're horrendous. They're terrible. There's weird poppy sort of
right, but they exist. It's almost like they just were trying to forget about them, right? It just doesn't make any sense that they're calling this QR3.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of years elapsed. The lineup's all different, and the sound is way different for Metal Health. So it's like Metal Health, the debut. So that's my number 21. My number 20 is Quiet Riot QR. So we've got this one, and here, so now we're up to October 21st, 88, and significant change. Paul Shortino's in the band instead of Kevin Dubrow, and he doesn't sound anything like Kevin Dubrow, and the band is totally different because of that. And it's a slight adjustment on QR3. Sean McNabb on bass, but yeah. Thumpy is in my notes all over the place here because I recognize there's a lot of like no hi-hat, really treated bass drums, treated snare drums, big soupy reverb on the snare drums and stuff. A lot of 4 on the floor with a lot of these songs as well. But I hear a little Kingdom Come in here. I hear a lot of stripper metal. That's another theme that comes up with a lot of these things moving on here. So yeah, it's disorienting in that Paul Shortino is in there. And then it's still that same sort of sound. Number 19, yeah, I don't have a lot of these physically, but here's my first one that I have physically. Theater of Pain, Motley Crue. I had a really hard time figuring out where to put Motley Crue on here. These are the albums I listen to the most out of all these, but they really are starting to feel like peaks and valleys albums for me, where I really like 2 or 3 songs, and a lot of the rest of it is just really sort of uninspired. Again, thudding, thumping, stripper metal, funky. Like anytime on all of these albums that we're going to talk about, they go for that funky thing, that Aerosmith Last Child idea, right? I'm just not on board. But on this album, I love to death City Boy Blues. I don't appreciate them doing a cover of Smoking in the Boys Room at all on here. What else is kind of good on here? 5 Years Dead's pretty cool. But again, cowbell, stripper metal sort of sound there as well. Dancing on Glass is actually pretty cool on here, even though it's kind of 4 on the floor. And the funny thing about this album is Tom Werman produces it, but it sounds like the classic Spencer Proffer Pasha sound, Pasha studio sound. Tom Werman has many different sounds in his coterie, right? He's got the crappy cardboardy sound that he's got for Cheap Trick and Ted Nugent. He's got the weird high fidelity sound on Mirrors, and now he's doing the Spencer Proffer sound. So yeah, that's my number 19. Number 18, keeping on theme, same kind of deal, uninspired, druggy, Motley Crue, running out of ideas. This is the sister album, basically, to Theater of Pain. And again, I like the title track a lot. The title track's really cool. Wild Side is a really interesting riff. Tommy's an interesting drummer as well. And for all my bringing up Tom Werman and the Pasha sound, I like that Pasha sound. I think it's really weird and radical. And that's kind of a cool thing about Motley Crue during this period. But again, there's just so much sort of filler, just songs that just seem like they're just barely written sort of songs, like just throw a riff together. Tommy does the thumpy kind of thing. And here's one that I feel like it's kind of odd putting it this low, and this kind of surprised me. But I've got Dr. Feelgood next. This is a big album. They tried harder. It's got a fair bit of personality, but as I was going through it again, I was shocked at how stripper metal and Poison and the Brain keyboards and stuff in here that are not that good. But it's got Don't Go Away Mad, which is kind of their Sweet Child of Mine, kind of okay. But yeah, I like Kickstart My Heart, and the title track is an absolute classic. It's really cool as well. But yeah, Rattlesnake Shake. I think of that chorus, and I just hate Motley Crue when they do stuff like that, right? And granted, I've got Motley Crue so low on this list because there's been so much bad blood about them recently, right? The fighting, the drama, the Mick Mars situation, the terrible singing from Vince, the recorded tracks, all that kind of stuff, right? So, people have kind of got it in for Motley Crue at this point. What else do I kind of like? Yeah, Slice of Your Pie is just total cherry pie, right? It's just that whole thing. What else? Vince is singing on these records. He's got a really cool voice, and I think he's
when
kind
he's
of a cool singer.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm into him as a singer. So yeah, it just feels weird because there's a lot of not great albums on this. It does feel weird having especially Dr. Feelgood this far down the list, but there you go. Let's see, how many would that be so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 2 more. Next, I've got Dokken Breaking the Chains with a G. This is there you go. So this is a funny one. This I was surprised also by having it so low down the list. I thought it would be much higher on the list. What I love about this record is that it originally came out in 1981 on Career in France. It came out in 82 in England. I had an import of it immediately as a kid. And it really, it almost like was, you think of Van Halen, you think of Motley Crue, not really Crue at this point because they have a weird debut album, but you think of this album as almost the start of hair metal because it is this 1981 album. But I remember thinking of it as these American guys have finally figured out a way to improve on the new wave of British heavy metal. But at the same time, these were American guys kind of couched in a European mindset because Dokken, he's hanging out in Europe and it's recorded at Dieter Dierk's studio, right? You've got Peter Baltes from Accept on bass, a little bit of Juan Cruce from Rat on bass as well. Mick Brown's in the band. Michael Wagner is recording it, but I went through the tracks again for this exercise and I found them pretty sleepy, pretty sleepy Don Dokken vocals, because that voice, you know, you gotta put some air behind that voice because it's really sweet and clean, right? It can be personalityless. So I'm finding that this album was much more conservative than I thought, and just a little. It had a little bit of a goofy 70s barroom rock vibe. It wasn't quite illuminated and woke to how to completely improve on the new wave of British heavy metal and start hair metal. And my last one is of this first 7 is Condition Critical, Quiet Riot. There's my my fully signed Bad Boy single from it, 12-inch single. But this is basically Metal Health 2, and it's including the whole which Slade cover is on here. Yeah, Mama We're All Crazy Now is on here. But this is such an insane sort of heavy Slade album. It's taking the idea of the stuff that didn't sound 70s-ish on Metal Health and just cranking it up and just making kind of an insane, almost boy band, Twisted Sister sort of party album. It's really over the top, frantic, in that zone. Again, very lively Pasha sort of sound on it. What did I really like on here? Actually, towards the end of the album, Scream and Shout, double bass, super heavy speed metal, love it. Red Alert, cool swaggering metal. Bad Boy, melodic, weird, very Mick Mars. And We Were Born to Rock, cool mid-tempo one. So yeah, basically the whole side too, to me, really redeems this album. It got a lot of heck at the time though, because the first one went 6 times platinum. This only went platinum. People were looking at it. It's basically their afterburner, right? People were complaining, you're doing the same thing again, especially the Slade cover. They stepped right in it with that, and the album cover for that matter. So yeah, that's my last one of the first 7.
Cool. All right, we're kind of thinking along the same lines here. My number 21 is Quiet Riot QR3. Terrible album. I mean, it's just keyboard synth drenched pop metal. It's not very good. It's almost like bands like Jafria do this type of thing pretty well. Quiet Riot does not. Basically, that's what it comes down to. This is easily, for me, there was this album and then everything else. This is pretty bad. That's my number 21. My number 20, I'm going to go QR, Quiet Riot. I don't think it's not as awful as the QR3 album. I think that having a different singer, Paul Shortino, adds this kind of like almost like Coverdale-ish, bluesy, raunchy element to this band. But the problem is the songs aren't all that interesting. It's kind of a dull record to me. I like the fact because I think Dubrow was getting to the point where he was becoming a caricature of himself, and I think they needed some fresh blood in this band. I think Shortino was an inspired choice. I just don't think the songs are all that good. So that's my number 20. My number 19, I'm going to go with Girls, Girls, Girls by Motley Crue. So I was into Crue just like everybody else was back in the day, but I remember with Theater of Pain and Girls, 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 I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure I like this stuff anymore. And I remember when they took Whitesnake out on tour with them, and Whitesnake, in my opinion, blew them off the stage. I was done with Motley Crue by that point. I mean, Wild Side is a great song. It's a great opener. I don't really care much for the rest of this album. Jailhouse Rock is terrible. I don't like the title track at all. I didn't like the videos. And you're right, it's just all very kind of like stripper pole, I don't know. It's, to me, it's lacking something. There was something about those first 2 albums that I think really worked for me, and the rest of them just really don't. Theater of Pain is my number. What are we at? 18. Again, I don't like the hits. It was never really big in the hits. I don't like the cover. Yeah, God, really, what do I really like on this album? Fight for Your Rights. It's kind of fun. Home Sweet Home was just total overkill. In fact, I don't know. I might even like this one less than Girls, Girls, Girl now that I think about it. They're both kind of around the same for me. But yeah, I don't really have a lot of use for this album. Dr. Feelgood is next. I got to say, the title track is killer. I always like that song, even though I'm not a fan of this band, really. That's really good. Kickstart My Heart is excellent. But then you got stuff like Sticky Sweet and Slice of Your Pie. I'm like, I just don't really have any use for it. So yeah, so 3 Motley Crues in a row. And then we're gonna go off to Quiet Riot, Condition Critical. So yeah, I kind of agree with everything you said. I think to me, I hadn't listened to this in a while. I love Carlos Cavazos' guitar tone on here. It's pretty monstrous, I think, which, even more so than the Mental Health album, I think, which is a plus for me because I always kind of dug him as a guitar player. He's no Randy Rhoads, but I think I thought he was very underrated. But man, picking another Slade song just didn't make any sense. And quite frankly, this whole album to me just sounds like they want to be Slade. And in fact, I did a show with Stephen and Simon for the UK connection where we talked about that Slade album that came out right around this time that did pretty well for them here. And the more I listen to that, I'm kind of like, God, Quiet Riot spent part of their career just basically ripping off Slade. And that's just what it sounds like. But this whole album to me just comes across as a pale imitation of Mental Health. It's exactly like you said. It's like they basically said, we're going to do that same album all over again. That being said, though, Sign of the Times, Winners Take All, Scream and Shout, Red Alert, all fun tracks, right? It's not a terrible album. It's just, to me, it's just so similar to the one that came before it. Next up, I'm going to go with Motley Crue's Too Fast for Love, which may be low for some people, but I was big into this when it came out. I think Livewire is terrific. I mean, the production is really weird on here, but it's got some PCR action is great. Public Enemy #1 is good. The title track is good. It's just real glammy, very oddly recorded, but yet at the time, this was kind of something really, really different. And it's very different sounding than the album that would come after it. But I still think, for me, this is a pretty good album. This is one of the 2 Motley Crue albums that I can actually listen to and think, I kind of enjoy that. Not too bad. So that's what do we have? 14, Martin?
I think you have one more. I thought
one
that
more. I
was
thought so. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So my number 4, whatever number this is here, is Mental Health by Quiet Riot. Okay. Again, another album that I was really into back in the day, and then I just kind of like fell off of it for a number of years. And I remember I had it on LP back in the day. Never bought it on CD till probably like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then I went and rebought it, and I would listen to it again. I'm like, yeah, brings back good memories, but it hasn't aged all that well for me. I think, the title track is still great. Let's Get Crazy, Run for Cover are great. I don't really care for the Slade cover. I don't really care for either Slade covers they did. I don't know. They're okay for what they are, but maybe I'm just not a big enough Slade fan. But I just find that this sounds very dated to me and just really juvenile. But it's still fun. And that's what most of these albums are. They're kind of fun, and it was perfect for the time. So yeah, that's my last one for this round.
Wow, we're really close on this, eh? It's pretty
interesting. Yeah, big time.
All right, my number 14 is Mental Health. And there's my fully signed Mental Health. Yeah, I bought this as a new release. Of course, there was a lot of buzz about this band. What I find about it now, I love your comment that it hasn't aged well. I never think in those terms too often, and it's pretty interesting hearing that. But the funny thing about this, as I alluded to, is that I feel like half the album is fully participating in 1983, and then half the album sounds like it's 1980 kind of thing. There's like Slick Black Cadillac. We know that's an older track. It right. Showed up on I've got an old comp that it was on, right? From I don't know, a couple years earlier, but yeah, and Love's a Bitch is a pretty cool, heavy, slow, dark one. Yeah, totally annoying. The Slade cover, don't like that at all. And Run for Cover is very cool, as you mentioned. Breathless as well. But yeah, it's instrumentals and mellow stuff, and so it just feels like it's a little it hasn't fully jumped into this thing. It feels like a band with a history, right? They have a history when you're listening to this thing, and I do love the production. And yeah, our band played Metal Health live. It was an encore track, but I don't feel that's aged very well. I really don't like it very much. Okay, so next I've got Great White Shot in the Dark. I don't have a physical of this, but I do have my Great White tab book. So if I ever get to be one quarter the guitarist you are, I've got this to help me along. So but Shot in the Dark, their second album, Michael Wagner produces terribly. August 1986, huge, annoying drums. Michael Lardy is in. He's not a member of the band, but it's important because there's keyboards all over the place. First for Audie DeBrow. But yeah, I find it starts good with She Shakes Me, but they have basically lost sort of their personality on here. You've got, again, thumpy, four on the floor, stripper metal, but the keyboards, the flagrant overt production. The best thing about it is the Angels cover, the Angel City cover, Face the Day. Love that song to death. Love that band to death. And even, you know, it's pretty pathetic, but on this guitar tab book, it's the first song listed there. They didn't even write it, right? So pretty ridiculous. But yeah, Runaway later on in it is pretty cool. I feel some Dokken vibes from this album, but yeah, my opinion hasn't really changed since getting it as a new release back in the day. I just felt that they really dropped off. And then I've got Once Bitten, Great White next. So it's the next album, the third full-length album, self-produced. Michael Lardy is now in the band, rhythm guitars, keys. It goes platinum for them. But again, yeah, it has the single off this was Rock Me, and I just cannot stand that song, right? I just cannot stand a gray, brown, morose, bluesy, you know, it's almost like, and then they pick this up as a little bit of a inspiration for their direction moving into later albums. And in the 90s and beyond, they kind of get to be a pretty authentic rootsy rock band, right? They really change what they're doing, but I cannot stand it. And then, yeah, you know, things like Gonna Get You, dull, thumpy, the big wet drums. Again, the idea where like these producers would take the hi-hat out of things and just go, you know, throughout these songs. Fast Road's pretty cool with the hot for teacher kind of beat. That's the other thing. I did an entire History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff podcast episode about looking for all these hot for teacher inspired OTT songs throughout the hair metal years, and it's hilarious how they are all over these albums we're talking about. But this is the one on here, Fast Road. On the Edge is on here, kind of old school. Great White, which is a pretty cool one on here. And then I've got Twice Shy from Great White, next one. So this is went double platinum April 12th, 1989. Produced by the manager of the band, Alan Niven, you know, who's, you know, long suffering, involved in that whole green world, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, you know, a lot of drama in his life. I wonder if he's ever done an autobiography. That would be a great one.
It would be interesting.
But yeah, it's produced by him and keyboardist Michael Lardy. So that's telling you what's going on here. But again, Move It starts pretty cool. Heart the Hunter is pretty cool. Heavy marauding sort of sound. But again, a lot of, you know, there's ballads on here, more stripper metal type things. And again, egregious 80s production. I think basically Great White at this point, you know, even though they're going platinum and double platinum, I don't feel like they have a personality at all. Other than Jack Russell's great voice. I really like his voice, of course. Let's see. So we've got 14, 13, 12. Let's see. Did I do 13? Yeah, 14, 13, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I got 3 more. Dokken Under Lock and Key is next. Always hated that album cover and the cheesy cutout key vibe thing, which I just recently realized is a key. I never thought of it as a key before.
I never noticed that either.
I know. Yeah, it's weird. You know, you could see it as a key. Maybe it's not really a key. I don't know. But anyways, they are standing under a lock and key or under a key. But to me, this is the album where they kind of smooth things out. It's you know, it's got the big Mick Brown beat on it. The production is okay. Neil Kernan, November 9th, 85. So it's their third album. Michael Wagner involved as well. He comes up in a lot of these things, right? Lightning Strikes Twice is really cool. It's fast, but it's not OTT. Yeah, it's got a lot of kind of dull. They've kind of settled down from Tooth and Nail on this record. Let's see. Where was that? Hang on, what's going on here? Oh yeah. Ratt, Reach for the Sky. I don't have a physical of that. So basically we've got, this is the fourth Ratt album. Or hang on, November 88. Yeah, I think so. The funny thing about Ratt is yeah, there you go. So that they are featuring prominently and high on this weird album cover, right? Very non-communicative, right? But they feature high on my list because who was the other when we were doing the thrash ones, right? They figure high in this list for the same reason Anthrax figured high on my thrash list, where I feel like they're just the most they're the most mature and complicated and interesting, and they've got the most depth sort of band out of all of these. But having said that, you know, when you get into those last two albums, they're just it's all their same really good tricks kind of over again. I really love City to City. They've got this big bombastic slow pocket that Bobby Blotzer creates for them, which is just great, right? And Warren DeMartini, such an underrated cool guitarist when it comes to riffs and solos. Produced by Beau Hill and Mike Stone, which makes sense. That's kind of their sound. Yeah, really like the chorus on No Surprise, even though it's kind of a funky one. But basically they try a bunch of different things on here. They're always good at the power ballads. So I want to love you tonight is pretty cool on here. Cannot stand Way Cool Jr., the big song on this, because it is that crappy, funky, bluesy metal thing that they sometimes get into. I just want to hear them cruise at that mid pace or the upper mid pace. And even when they do fast ones, they're really cool because they are not particularly an OTT band, but they're good at that fast thing. And they sometimes get a little bit of spirit of punk into what they're doing, which makes sense because Stephen Pearcy's voice is this really cool, interesting, gravelly voice. You know, we know notoriously he wasn't very good live because probably because he didn't really take care of himself, right? Sorry, I got to count here again. I just always, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I got one more. Too Fast for Love is next. I don't have a physical of that anymore, oddly. But basically, I agree with everything you say, except that I'm just always amused at what such a weird album this is. Strange production, crazy, weird, eccentric drummer and Tommy Lee. Weird, odd guitar sound. The instruments sound separated all over the place. It's almost like a punk rock album, right? It's punk, absolutely. It's glam. It's heavy as hell sounding. Yet they're doing these glam things, and you've got this syrupy, sweet vocal up top. It's just a really neat, interesting, eccentric album. The album cover doesn't particularly make sense with it. The logo does. It's got this strange logo where it's blocked. It's outlined on one word and it's filled in on the other word. Red and white kind of thing. It's just. I always think of Hanoi Rocks when I think of that album. It kind of lines up with Hanoi Rocks for me. But it's just this strange. It's almost like they herded these ridiculous cats together, and they got down to business and made an album. It's like no album was ever going to sound like this ever again, because just there's no way that there's these four personalities that could possibly do this again or duplicate it. It's just a weird, interesting one-off sound, and I kind of like that about it. So that is my next 7.
And oddly enough, their next album, which is my next choice, Shout at the Devil, doesn't sound anything like that album.
That's right.
And how metal did we think Motley Crue were with Shout at the Devil, right? I mean, even that first video, Mick's got the blood coming out of his mouth and wearing all black. And I remember they went on that tour with Ozzy, and we were all like, oh, Motley Crue, they're so heavy, they're so great. And this is a really fun album. I mean, the title track, Kills, Looks to Kill, is a great, memorable song. You know, did we need another cover of Helter Skelter? I don't know, but they did it really good. Red Hot, Too Young to Fall in Love, so catchy. Knock 'em Dead Kid, 10 Seconds to Love. I mean, there's a lot of good anthems on this album. It's a pretty heavy album. Unfortunately, they would never do another album quite like this. And that's, I think, what's so cool about those first two records. They're so unique. They're so different from each other. And then they would kind of fall into this kind of like this lane that we already have talked about with the next handful of albums there. So yeah, Shout the Devil is my next one. After that, I'm going to go with, so I tell you, Martin, one of the cool things about doing this exercise is that I had all of these Great White albums in the 80s, but I had them on vinyl or cassette and never replaced them. So I hadn't heard these Great White albums in a couple of decades. I actually quite enjoyed them. I was sitting there thinking the other day, I'm like, I should go out and get those. I need to own these again. So Once Bitten is my next choice from Great White. I was surprised how much I remembered this album and how much I really enjoyed, because I don't think I was really that big of a fan back then. It was like Great White was one of those bands. It's like, you know, everybody was into, but I was kind of like, they were like a periphery band for me. It's like, all right, I'll buy their records, I'll listen to them, I'll get into them a bit. I saw them live once or twice, but I never really got that big into them. But man, Lady Red Light, great song. I kind of dig Rock Me.
Right.
I mean, Mistreater is great. Fast Road is good. It's just this kind of bluesy, gutsy type of hard rock or metal, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's a little bit different than these other bands we're talking about here today. But I love his voice. I think his voice is really, really great. I think that's one of the main attractions for me on these albums. So that's my next choice. Then I'm going to go with Ratt's Reach for the Sky. Again, a decent album. I don't think it's quite as good as the ones that came before it, but like you said, City to City is great. I Want a Woman is a terrific song. I like Way Cool Jr. I think it's kind of funky and groovy. I kind of dig it. It's fun. You know, I Want to Love You Tonight, like you said, is terrific. Chain Reaction is really good. Very solid record for me. It's got all the attributes we love so much about Ratt. And man, you know, Warren is such a great guitar player, and Robin too was very good as well. And I think one of the cool things about this band is that they were never afraid to show their musical virtuosity. And then they, I think, really made do with having a singer that technically is not a great singer, but he's got such a unique vocal style, and they make it all work. And I think that's what's really cool about these Ratt albums. So that's my next one. And then I'm going to go with Dancing Undercover, also from Ratt. I saw them on this tour with Poison. That was not good. Oof, that was one of the worst shows I've ever seen. But I really dig this album. I think Dance is a great song. One Good Lover, Drive Me Crazy. Slip of the Lip has that kind of like that funky in the groove type of thing that I like about these guys. But like the guitar work is always so raunchy and just so like, I don't know, there's something about it. Take a Chance is another great song. Really, really good album. I like this one a lot. Next up, we're going to go with Great White, Shot in the Dark. Again, I can kind of see where you're coming from on here. I like the kind of bluesy, gutsy nature of this band and this album. And I think Jack just sounds great. I love the title track. She Shakes Me is a really, really good song. And I think Face the Day is a great cover, a really good cover, and arguably the best song on the album. I don't know. I very rarely say that about cover songs, but it's really, really good. And What Do You Do is another really good song. Yeah, the production is kind of weird and everything like that, but it's pales in comparison to I think their debut, but it's still, I think, pretty damn good. So that's my next choice. Next up, I'm going to go with Twice Shy. And, you know, this album did really well for themselves. Move It is a great song. I like, yeah, there we go. Heart the Hunter is terrific. I love the Angel song. Mr. Bone is great. How about House of Broken Love? I had forgotten how much I dug that back in the day. That's really, really good. And then you got, you know, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, the cover. I never need to hear that song again, but I think the rest of this album is really, really strong, and I like it a lot. It sold really well for a reason. It's just really
I
good.
love Ian Hunter. I'm glad they did that song. That was so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I remember that song was so overplayed back in the day, and I remember because I had this album and I was thinking, man, there's like other songs on here that I think are as deserving for the big exposure, and I'm glad they did well with it. And yeah, it's good for Ian because he was getting obviously some residuals from that, but it was just so overplayed at the time. But and it overshadowed, I think, the rest of the album. And the rest of the album is actually really, really good. All right, so that was Twice Shy. What is that? That's my last one,
I think
right?
you got one more.
One more? Okay. So the last one, my next one, I'm going to go with the self-titled debut from Great White. This is good. Surprisingly, pretty damn heavy album. And, I remember when this came out, I'm pretty sure I saw them open for Judas Priest, if I remember correctly. And I remember at the time, I really wasn't aware of them, but I was really impressed with them live. But I remember that the song Stick It got like a little bit of attention. That's a terrific track. But man, this Street Killer is awesome on here. Out of the Night. They do another cover, right? They do Substitute by The Who. That's pretty decent. Nightmares is good. I like the production of it. It's a Michael Wagner production. It's just sounds very different from every other album that they did. But it's real gutsy, pretty heavy and rocking, good guitar tone on it. And again, Jack sounds amazing. I think this guy probably never got the due that he deserved as being like a real kind of unique, strong singer from this time period. So yeah, that's my last one of this group. Great stuff.
Nice. Okay. My number 7 is Dokken, Back for the Attack, which I don't have a physical of. But I love that album cover too.
Yeah,
Such
it's
a cool
quite
album
good
cover, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the funny thing about this one is it's 67 minutes long, right? It's just this bizarrely crazy long album on vinyl from the vinyl years, and it suffered for it. It does sound a little bit thin. November 2nd, 87, it went platinum. Neil Kernan is producing. He was involved with Queensryche as well. This is an album that I remember when it came out, the respect went back for Dokken. It kind of went away for Under Lock and Key, and then it came back because it felt meaty. It felt like they were trying really hard. It was dense. It was very technical. So they,
definitely not as commercial sounding as Under Lock.
Yeah, exactly. I love Prisoner on here. Lost Behind the Wall is really cool. Crushing riff on that one. Cry of the Gypsy, cool riff. Kiss of Death, super heavy, cool stuff. You got Mr. Scary on there, the famous instrumental. But yeah, so this is just one of those where I feel like I almost respected Dokken as much as Ratt again, but I didn't really play the album a lot. And speaking of Ratt, next I've got Dancing Undercover, which again, same sort of thing. We've got the idea where I love dance, huge pocket, produced by Bobby on that. It must be said, one of the cool things about Bobby Blotzer as well, besides that big pocket that he could create, that just grand epic sound, is he had that really interesting idea and way of dovetailing the electronic toms, the syndromes with the regular kit. So that always sounded tasteful the way he would do that. He had very, very neat fills. So Good, So Fine on here. Hang on, sorry. Looking for Love on here is a really cool one. Drive Me Crazy is a really cool one on here. Again, those big heroic sort of chords. Body Talk, good fast chugging one, reminds me a little bit of Quiet Riot. But yeah, so now we're into the third Ratt album, and this is where, partially because of that morose, weird album cover, it just felt like they were treading water a little bit. But again, it's a great way to tread water when you've got such an interesting sound. Number 5, I've got Shout at the Devil, which again, I just remember the singles off this were so good. Looks That Kill, every bar band that you would go and see would be playing these songs. Too Young to Fall in Love is amazing. Like these are a couple probably of the very best songs on this entire list. And they're not even that technical. They're pretty simple. Like this is a really simple sort of band on this album. And then for your true heavy metal fix, you've got Shout at the Devil. You've got the cover of Helter Skelter. You've got kind of the boneheaded stuff on here, like Red Hot. 10 Seconds to Love's kind of the same way. Knock 'Em Dead Kid is completely boneheaded, right? They're just fall into a status quo groove. You know, it's not boogie rock, but just this thing of just like hanging on to just a really dull riff and sticking to it. And the production on here are enigmatic Tom Werman again, giving us a sound that he would never kind of do ever again. It's just this really pummeling, blocky, but still nicely dry early days heavy metal sound. So yeah, this album was kind of punk rock in a different way from Too Fast for Love, and had a lot of variety. And just for some weird reason, there was just such great melody and personality that came out of Looks That Kill, because it's a really simple, obvious riff, but just something about the delivery and this band all together playing this song just had such a mission to it, right? And again, same thing for Too Young to Fall in Love, the chord movement in it, right? So yeah, a lot to like about this album. A lot of variety, a lot of different ideas tried. Next, I've got Dokken Tooth and Nail at number 4. And when this came out, this was definitely an album that you respected the heck out of. It really felt like it was Dokken and Ratt were the cerebral bands of this whole thing. It certainly wasn't Twisted Sister or Motley Crue or Quiet Riot. You just felt the technicality of George Lynch and the fast drumming, cool drumming of Mick Brown on here. Produced by Tom Werman again. Here he comes again. And what does he do on here? To my mind, this is not that well produced. It's noisy, it's distorted, and it also has the age-old Tom Werman lack of bass that you get on the Cheap Trick and the Ted Nugent albums. This is a pretty harsh album. I wish it was produced with a little more bottom end, but it is definitely missing that. But yeah, you get the big crazy AC/DC / Ratt grooves on here, but you also get the fast stuff and the technicality of George, and Don does a great job as well. So yeah, and Just Got Lucky, great pop metal song on here.
Yeah.
Number 3, I don't have a physical of this anymore. I love that first Great White album. That is such a super heavy album. I love the no nonsense Michael Wagner early days before any of the travesties came in, but still really high tech production. It sounds really tight and professional. And yeah, just wall to wall heaviness, crushing Mark Kendall riffs, great singing on this. Even Substitute is great on this album. You got 3 tracks brought forward from the Out of the Night EP. So I remember getting that EP. It's white vinyl, right? I remember getting that as a new release. You get the same 5 songs, I believe it is, on side 1 as you got on side 2. So it's funny, the parallels with Ratt, because they've got an EP called Out of the Night. Ratt's first album's called Out of the Cellar, and the Great White EP and the Ratt EP came out at the same time. And I remember thinking, wow, there's something to this LA metal thing. Like, this is an improvement on the new wave of British heavy metal in certain ways, right? Because both of those items were really, really good. So yeah, they brought 3 tracks forward. But they re-recorded them. And yeah, just massive riffs on here. Nightmares on here. Street Killer, totally heavy, as you mentioned. Cool ballad on here, and Hold On. This album absolutely stands up, and I think they got a lot of personality. It's not their bluesy personality of the later days. It's just these really super muscular sounding riffy metal songs, like literally laser focused on this idea that everything you didn't like about the new wave of British heavy metal is fixed by these American bands moving forward. And that was kind of a cool thing that you got with this. Number 2, I'm going with Invasion of Your Privacy. Ratt. We've got I've got my framed up version of this.
There you go.
With some passes and stuff. So this is the second time around for Ratt, and that interesting, cool sound that you got on the first one, they've tightened it up. They've gone a little uptown, a little upscale. They're a little Billy Joel Uptown Girl on this, right? You've got the Uptown Girl on the front cover, very New York looking kind of front cover. But what a great album. You're in Love, so heavy, so light on the title, but such a great heavy song. Like this was a band that was not afraid to be really heavy metal, right? Lay It Down, same kind of thing with that great intro riff. It's just like one of the most celebrated riffs of the whole hair metal thing. Just such a great sound that they get on this, right? Even closer to my heart. Good dark ballad. That's the other thing about Ratt that was really cool that I always felt is that they tried so hard, right? They were really ambitious and meticulous, and it really had that Aerosmith sort of hardworking sort of vibe to it. But yeah, everything on here is just great. And it's just like a tightening of what they did on the first one. And the first one, Out of the Cellar, is my first one. I do not have a physical of this anymore, but it is my number one of this entire batch of albums. And it's just wall to wall great songs. I think the best song on this entire 21 album coterie of hair metal albums is Round and Round. It's such a beautifully put together song. The riff is complicated, the parts are cool, and yet it's still so accessible. It's so melodic, but it's uncompromisingly heavy metal. It's a total heavy metal song, right? And then, man, lack of communication, even heavier. Back for More, heavy, but you're starting to get into that expansive epic groove that you get on Invasion. Morning After is cool with a gallop. I mean, what hair metal bands do this pure heavy metal gallop thing? Ratt does for you. I'm Insane, fast metal on here. Amazingly recorded. It's just like right out of the blocks, so professional. And it's just the masterpiece of the whole hair metal thing. And I don't think you really get other masterpieces until you get way late in the game with like Badlands or Love Hate. Certainly the second Love Hate, including the first Love Hate, the Guns N' Roses, you can argue, but I mean, I almost feel like this is more classically and crafted and well put together than the Guns N' Roses album. And I think it deserves credit for being like 3 years earlier than that as well. So yeah, that's my number one. So number one, Ratt, Out of the Cellar. Number two, Invasion of Your Privacy. Number three, Great White, Great White. Those are the three that I just love. Like there's a big gulf. There's a gulf even down to my number four with Tooth and Nail. So those three are my favorite three of this whole list.
Cool. Yeah, we're pretty similar here. I realized I made a mistake. Breaking the Chain should have been my number 13. Okay. So I kind of forgot. I went right to Shout the Devil. So this one slots in down below. So we're going to bypass that for now. So I only have 6 here at the last. So my number 5 will be Back for the Attack by Dokken. Everything is said, really heavy, kind of dark album. The antithesis to Under Lock and Key. And maybe the songs aren't quite as memorable, but there's some just great stuff on here. I mean, Kiss of Death is just one of my favorite songs by Dokken. So heavy. Just George's guitar tone on here is just absolutely killer. So that's my number 5. My number 4 is going to be Invasion of Your Privacy. I mean, Lay It Down you're absolutely right. That's one of the greatest riffs of all time. I call it the circular riff because that riff just goes round and round, right? Yeah. It goes round and round. So good. You're in Love is so good. I love the production of this album. And I think that by this time, this band knows that they're pretty damn good and pretty damn cool. And you could they're just bursting with confidence on this album. They know they knocked it out of the park with that debut, but here it's like all of a sudden they know they're playing with the big boys. Really, really good album. That's my number 3. My number 2, where is it? That's my number 4. This is my number 3 is Under Lock and Key. I mean, I love this album. Yeah, it's definitely more commercial than the one before, the one after, but it's just that the songs are so good. Unchained the Night is so good. I love The Hunter. In My Dreams is just a great little slice of pop metal. I love the riff in it. Lightning Strikes Again. It's Not Love. Even the ballads are kind of cool. Will the Sun Rise? This kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? This is like this sense of melancholy in this album. And that's Don. That's his way of singing, I think. So you mix that with the upbeat nature of some of the arrangements. A really fascinating listen. Will the Sun Rise is really good.
There's a bit of Accept Balls to the Wall in the music of that band too.
Yeah, right? A little bit. Yeah, because Ball to the Wall is definitely different for them as well. So yeah, but you're right. The album cover is just god awful. Never liked it. The hair looks ridiculous and just, yeah, whatever. I'm sure they regret doing this album cover. Yeah. After all these years. Yeah. My number 2 is going to be Out of the Cellar. Everything he said, absolutely agree with it. There's just one classic after another on here. Man, Back for More is so good. Round and Round is so good. I mean, there's not a bad song on here. You're in Trouble. There's riffs everywhere. There's blazing twin guitars everywhere. Steven sounds great on here. Bobby is just pounding away. Wanted Man is so good. Lack of communication. It's amazing when you think about like how many of these songs either got radio airplay or had a big video on MTV. And it practically, what, 60% of this album? And great album cover too. Yeah, and we all thought this was pretty heavy at the time. Because I think when these initial albums were coming out, there really was no hair metal perspective yet. We were just thinking this was just another heavy band, and yeah, they came from LA. So yeah, that's my number 2. Could have been my number 1, but my number 1, I don't know. I have this thing about Tooth and Nail. I love Tooth and Nail. Yeah. Just such a great album. Great look for the band too. On the back, the album cover is cool. George Lynch is just rampaging all throughout this album, and the title track is so good. Just Got Lucky is so catchy. You know, Heartless Heart, Don't Close Your Eyes, Into the Fire. That was like a nice little hit for them. Really great guitar solo on that. Bullets to Spare, Alone Again, also fairly big hit for them. Again, just like the Out of the Cellar album, just nonstop song after song, just banger tracks on here. So memorable. I think, you know, easily. And, you know, I agree with you with the Great White debut. I think that's also sensational. And it's like most of these bands early on, even Motley Crue, really knocked it out of the park. And then, you know, once they all started getting bigger and the music landscape is changing a little bit, more about the image, more about the videos, I think some of the music suffered for it a little bit across the board. But yeah, these are easy 1 and 2 for me. So
nice, very cool. Wow, that was
yeah, we were not all that different, I think here. Yeah, other than the top, maybe the order a little changed, but I mean our bottom half was pretty much identical for the most part.
Very cool.
So, nice. All right, Martin. Before we let you go, what's going on with you over on the Contrarians and the podcast and books and things? Anything new to report?
Well, let's see. We did our album cover show. Oh yeah, I had my 5th year anniversary of History in 5 Songs with
nice. Congratulations.
Podcast. The 260th episode, which is exactly 52 divided by 5. Augustine pointed out because I had never missed a week, so I did that. I think I did that one that was called The Battle of 1976, and I just finished the new one, which is slightly inspired actually by our going through the thrash 90s thing. And I explain it all in it. I called it AC/DC, Alice in Chains, and Thrash. So that's what episode 261 is about. And of course, I've got books kind of coming out all the time. We've got Queen Live, Led Zeppelin, visual biography, and that's all at martinpopoff.com. I still got my 2 Imaginos books, the panel books, working on 2 more of those right now, the Rainbow and the Genesis. And the Genesis is going to be 2-part, so I got to get that done fairly soon. But yeah, martinpopoff.com, and sign them, send them out from the office here.
Cool. Sounds good. Let's see. We got Ken Golden is coming in a couple hours for the Professor's Picks, a big epic, nearly hour-long episode of that, because Ken's got all sorts of new stuff that is hitting today. New prog, new metal, lots of new fusion, and including a big shipment of Japanese jazz rock that he has procured that you guys are going to be interested in seeing. So that's coming up this afternoon. Tonight, we've got the next episode of the book club. So Count Ralphus, Ralph Tambor, and myself will be talking about and reviewing 2 Eddie Van Halen books that we've each read. He's read Eruption. I've read Steve Rosen's Tone Chaser. And we brought Steve Rosen back on board again to talk a little bit more about his time being a friend of Eddie Van Halen's in this book. So that's coming up tonight. Tomorrow, the review crew, Jamie Laszlo and his new crew, will be reviewing all sorts of new albums. And then Sunday, I will be ranking the albums of the great Georgia sludge metal, prog metal, stoner metal band Kylesa. So that's coming up on Sunday. So lots happening here on Sea of Tranquility. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together all the damn time. Stay tuned next Friday. Martin and I will be back once again here at the Funhouse. Till then, for Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Enjoy your weekend. Everybody here, stay cool if you're in the U.S. We're in the middle of a heat wave, but try and stay cool, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.